Hey everybody, Shabba Nobody Else's Auto. We are here at one of the most amazing collections I've ever seen, the Harold Wirt Pioneer Village Museum in Minden, Nebraska. Now, if you've never been here before, you need to get here. Obviously, if you're hanging out with us here on the channel, you like old cars and trucks. This place has an absolutely amazing collection of cars and trucks. If we look around here, you can see just this one building, just a tiny, tiny sampling of the cars and trucks in this collection. And yes, it is amazing. What we're going to share with you today is even more amazing. When's the last time you've seen a Cadillac Pickup? Not a very common car. We're going to take a look at a 1924 Cadillac Pickup in this video. Which, one thing, the entire theory behind this collection was history of man's progress. So these vehicles, as well as anything else you can think of, your daily kitchen utensils all the way up to trains, are here in chronological order. This entire museum is based on following the history of man, so all these artifacts are in order. And that's what's cool when we're checking out these vehicles. They're in chronological order. You can see things as they progress. We see the 40 Cadillac, the 41 Cadillac, and on down the row up into the 50s eras of Cadillacs just in this row. But right here on the corner, kind of in a special spot, is this very early 1924 Cadillac. Now, we see this beautiful badge with the wreath around it, used from right around 1923 to 1925. This one is a 24. And one thing about the cars in this collection is this collection was started in the early 50s, and most of these cars were bought in the 50s and 60s and added to this collection and put in here. Now, fortunately for us, they are letting us behind the rails to share some of this stuff with you, so we super appreciate that, and we hope you enjoyed it. This one here, this 1924 Cadillac, was bought in 1967, is when this one was actually added to this collection. Now, we see for some reason the headlights are missing off of this car, but other than that, I mean, this just looks like an old car. We still see a lot of the blue paint on it, which I think looks original. We look up here and we see how thin it is up here on the top. You can almost see through the paint. So I believe that most of this blue is original. Now we see this front fender. It's been welded. Everything in this era, these fenders were very prone to cracking. That's just what happened. So back in the day, they just fixed it before it got any worse. This car has the original tiny little Cadillac grease caps on it, which are beautiful. So this would have, even in the 20s, been a luxury car. Now, we all know what happened in the 1930s. The United States fell into the Great Depression. Things were bad. People were not making it. A lot of people were just trying to find food. And a lot of people still had to work. Now, they didn't always have money to buy what they needed. The Great Depression was a time in America where people learned to make things work because they had to. They didn't have a choice. There wasn't much money out there. Things were really bad after the stock market crashed in 1929. So people did what they had to do. And this 1924 Cadillac is a perfect example of that. Now, you got to remember, back in those days, vehicles didn't last long. You know, today it's not uncommon to get 20 years out of a vehicle. Back then, 5, 10 years, a vehicle was pretty much used up. So this 1924 Cadillac, as you got well into the Great Depression in the mid-30s, would have been pretty much a worn-out 10-year-old car. However, we don't know what the owner of this car needed or what he did for a living, but he needed a truck. And that's what happened to this 1924 Cadillac. Let's come on around the back and check this thing out. And this, believe it or not, was very common back in the day. They basically, from what we can tell, cut this car off. This appears as though it was a sedan because this does look like the front door, the door pillar where would have been the front of the back door. Basically cut it off here. We can see how this is actually wood here that was, and then not only wood put in here, but then actually milled down or sanded down to somewhat fit the curvature to follow the rear fenders. We can look in the back here and see it actually has somewhat of a truck bed. Obviously, all appears to have been hand done when we see the kind of the rough cuts in this wood. We see how they took some scrap metal and filled this in. So they probably took this whole section of the body out when they cut it. When they built this, they filled this in. This is just basically tin, and we can see the straight tip screws that has this held together to fill this in over the wheel. Remember, this was a Cadillac. It was a big premier luxury car. So it had big rear fenders. You can see the sizes of these rear wheels and tires. See how big they were. So, this was a lot of car here that was modified and turned into a pickup. That's what they needed. So that's what they had to do. We come around the back of this thing. It does still have the trunk on it. However, we see there would have been a panel back here to cover this up. But it appears as though this has been modified as well, because we see some rough cuts on some of this wood back here. This panel here is a piece of wood that appears to have been cut and fitted into that. Over here on the other side, we've basically got the exact same thing. We've got this tin filler here to cover this up, some hand cut wood here to finish this out, and once again, rough cut but smoothed down wood to finish these edges out of this small pickup bed. Now obviously it's not a huge pickup bed. It does still have the trunk on it on the back, but in that time period, that's what they needed. So I'm guessing, and this is obviously pure speculation because this car / pickup has been in this collection for almost 60 years. I'm sure whoever built this car, wherever they got this car from, I'm sure those individuals probably aren't with us anymore, and I'm sure a lot of that history has been lost. However, what we've seen, and obviously I've been around cars a long time, and you do see this happening to cars of this era, and that's when it happened, was during the Depression. If you needed a pickup and you didn't have one, but you could buy an old used Cadillac cheaply, you made it what you needed to make it, because that's what happened back then. There wasn't the money to just go out and buy what you needed. People made do with what they had. And I believe, and there again, this is speculation, but I believe that's what happened to this 1924 Cadillac. Now that's the other part that is so great about this collection, the Harold Wirt Pioneer Village Museum. These cars are in exactly as found condition. This is how they bought this. Nobody has tried to restore it. When we look at the paint on the hood, we can see how thin that paint is. That's probably original paint on the front. Obviously, they just painted everything back here black when they added this pickup bed to it, because everything is black up behind this B pillar. So it appears as though this B pillar was a sedan. This was a normal B pillar. Everything behind that is just black from where they made this pickup bed. So to see some of these cars like this is another piece of American history, because a lot of people don't think about in those Depression era years where you made do with what you had. And that is what I believe this 1924 Cadillac is a perfect example of. And when we look at this 40 Cadillac sitting here, we see some scuffs and scratches on the fenders. We even see bald tires on it, because these cars are original as found. So not only does the Harold Wirt Pioneer Village Museum in Minden, Nebraska tell the story in chronological order of the history of man, it also fills in a lot of the blanks that a lot of people don't realize. And this is a perfect example of that. Some of the other cars we've seen here, you'll be sure to check out the playlist for some of these. The 1942 Blackout models. We did a video on a 1942 Blackout. You'll want to check that out. The Henry J versus the Allstate. They have one of each sitting right beside each other. This museum does such an amazing job of filling in those blanks in American history that a typical museum would overlook. And that's why this is so great. And that's why this Cadillac is so great. Seeing this thing here in its as modified condition for a period of time that I hope none of us ever have to experience, because the Great Depression was a rough time in America. People did what they had to do. This 1924 Cadillac sitting here in this museum tells that part of the story. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to check out the full playlist from the Pioneer Village here in Minden, Nebraska. It is an amazing place. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Keep up with all the old cool car and truck stuff we do on here. Stay tuned, everybody. Lots more cool stuff coming. Hope you enjoyed the Caddy pickup.